Welcome back to The Fire Break. I'm Steve Wolf. The Fire Break is sponsored by Team Wildfire, investigating and building new technologies to reduce fatalities and property losses from wildfires. I've got with me today Mesut Bilgili. He's coming to me all the way from Istanbul, which is pretty far away, and it's it's in Turkey. And Turkey's had some major disasters lately. I'm sure you're aware of that. In the earthquake realm. Maybe not so much in the wildfire range yet, but Mesut will tell me. Mesut, welcome to the Fire Break. How are you today?
I'm good, Steve. Thank you for hosting me.
Oh, you're very welcome. You are the CEO of an organization called Life After Disaster. Can you tell me what that is and how you started it?
Of course. So I'm originally in communications. I started my journey as an admin, 20 years ago. I was doing TV commercials. Along the years, I started my own, small ad agency. But almost like 5 years ago, I decided to quit all that and pay more attention to these global issues like the women's right, the global warming, the disasters. Or, so I started to use my skill in those areas to create awareness, but I was never personally affected by any of the issues I used to focus until February 6th of last year. There was a devastating earthquake in Turkey. 10 cities got affected. And one of those cities happens to be my parents' hometown. So even though they don't live there anymore, they moved to Istanbul, long before I was born. Still, we have a heritage, and we got relatives living in that city. So it was a very emotional wake-up call for me, and I thought I need to do something about this. And I started this initiative called Life After Disaster. I think you're curious what Life After Disaster does.
And so, what is included in the initiative? What type of work do you do?
So the original idea was that it all started with a question of
So
what can I
what is
really
the
do?
mission of Life After Disaster?
Yeah. So it all started with a question of what can I do to contribute in the disaster recovery process? And I quickly realized that, I'm not good at many things, but there are certain skills I have that can be very useful, which is, for example, networking, project management. Uh, and then at some point, I was brainstorming. This is the first days of the earthquake. I was brainstorming, like, how can we really step in and make a difference? And I wrote a LinkedIn article. It was talking about us coming together to using our skills, combining our skills, and achieving something that we cannot individually do. And that was a good response to that article. People offered their help, and a small group of people, we came together. At first, to organize
Mesut,
the
I'm sorry,
donations.
I'm not hearing most of what you say. There's a weak internet connection.
Mm,
So why don't you just talk? It's being recorded, and I'll hear everything you say in the recording when it uploads.
one moment.
Yeah, of course.
Of course, can you hear me now?
Oh, that's much better.
Okay.
Mesut, can you hear me?
Yes. Unfortunately, where I live, there is these internet connection issues. It happens. I'm just gonna try to switch the connection and see if that. How about now? Yeah, I can. I can hear you well.
Yeah.
Sure.
Great. Thank you for fixing that, Desi. Okay. So, Mesut, you said that you were in the advertising industry earlier, and then you transitioned as a result of your personal experience with your parents' hometown being destroyed by an earthquake. Uh, Tell me about the mission of Life After Disaster and what do you do exactly?
Yeah. So the original idea was to bring people together and find solutions to uh, disaster recovery. I was more focused on long-term healing than immediate uh, help. And I first few days was very difficult for me. I was, feeling very lost. I was very confused, and then I came with this idea uh, that if we all combined our skills together, we could be very much helpful in these kind of situations. And I wrote this LinkedIn article, and there was a good response to it. People offered their help, and that's how we started the Life After Disaster initiative. At this point, we usually focus on networking, um, bringing the funds to the region, helping local grassroots organizations to reach the resources they need. We also launched a community center in collaboration with the local municipality. In these collaboration centers, we are providing space for teenagers to study, plus the local grassroots organizations to launch their projects. Uh, so there isn't just one thing we do. We are operating in a various scale of projects, but the overall idea is how we can bring people together and learn from each other so we can, heal.
And what did you come up with? What are the strategies that you have developed or learned that are most effective in healing?
Yeah. So I'm lucky because when I first started to reach out to people, I found a very good mentor. Actually, she was on your show as well, Jennifer Gray Thompson. A friend of mine introduced me to her, and the very first time we spoke, she said, "How can I help? What do you need?" And even though it sounds very simple, at that very moment, it was life changing for me because she didn't say, "Who are you?" She didn't say, "Oh, what do you think you can do?" She said, "What do you need? How can I help?" And I try to carry that forward as much as possible, uh, giving a space to people where they can really express themselves, understanding them, and trying to match them with the resources they need. Of course, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But I guess what I really realized is how much we really need to this human connection and collaboration in our most difficult times. I think that goes beyond any technology we can develop or any framework we can come up with. Obviously, the technology is needed. Obviously, we need to work in certain frameworks. But I believe the human factor is the most important thing in all this.
So
And
when
that's what
you're
I learned. That's what
speaking
I
with
realized.
the victims of recent disasters, as in when you're speaking with the victims of recent disasters, what are the commonalities of what they need? You said the human factor was paramount. In what form is that? What has been most helpful to people that you work with?
Uh, well, first of all, it's complicated. There isn't a single answer. It's a complex, multi-layered issue. So when I think the very first time I talked with a person, who was affected by this earthquake, it was few weeks in, and we were chatting over the Zoom or some of the conference apps, because at that time it was still like almost impossible to reach the area, even if I wanted to. And I was trying to figure out at that point, like what kind of immediate help we could provide. And I'm asking them, okay, so like, how can we help? What do you really need? And they are telling me, thank you very much. We don't need anything. And it's because they are proud people. They don't want to look like the victims. But it's obvious that, they were in need of help. So obviously, the more we talked, we started to understand the situation better and how we can help. But I think this initial connection, person to person, human to human connection, uh, is the most important part in this whole recovery process. how you sow those seeds. How do you uh, get in touch with the community, understand their needs, and then obviously build on top of that. Because we achieved a lot of things in the last 1 year, and it was all because um, we didn't start from a fixed formula. Instead, we realized that this is a unique situation, unique to this culture, unique to this area. So yeah, I think if any advice I can give to anybody who wants to uh, step into disaster recovery work in their own regions, start listening from people and give them space.
So you very intelligently realized that the best way to help was by listening to people and finding out what they need, although you had to work around the issue that people sometimes didn't want to ask for help. Did you ask them, what do you think your neighbors need?
Well, of course, I mean, like I said, it's a complex issue because uh, every culture is different, even every person is different. So, like in certain circumstances, uh, it's easy to see the solution, but difficult to apply it. It's and the only reason is because the people are not ready for it and they don't easily accept that. In other cases, everybody is ready to work on towards the solution, but you can't really find the right answer. So I don't necessarily think that there is just one, great thing we can do to solve these mega disaster issues very easily. But all along the way, I always encourage people to, uh, kind of like use the entrepreneurial skills because I'm a like a good believer of innovation, and innovation doesn't necessarily mean technological innovation, but like out of the box thinking, using entrepreneurial skills to change the situations. So these are the things we are trying to advocate and teach people, uh, and work with the locals and help them to make a difference in their own communities. So instead of us going out there with the answers, we try to increase the capacity and kind of bring them the tools they need so they can make a difference in their own lives.
So what does that look like when you deploy that? How do you provide that platform for people to start to express what they need?
Yeah, so it is not easy if you are in that situation. It is easier for me because even though I was emotionally connected to this issue, I wasn't personally affected. Uh, I didn't lose my house. I didn't lose my livelihood. So the first thing was to figure out uh, what kind of space we can provide them, so they can really start working on the solutions themselves locally. And we came up with an idea that, okay, so this is like earthquake is a specific type of disaster where all the usable spaces are gone. Like it's difficult to find uh, gathering spaces. The internet connection is gone. Infrastructure is pretty much becomes destroyed. You won't easily find a co-working space and just start brainstorming with your friends. you are living in a tent, and even the public transportation, is not working anymore. So we figured if we are going to um, make a difference and kind of mobilize people, uh, we need to create these spaces. And these spaces obviously needs to have the basic uh, items they might need while they are working. These spaces needs internet connection as much as possible. This space needs so like, for example, arranging the transportation, like can we bring a shuttle service to that area? And then obviously we need mentors, and at some point we need the resources. So we went through these steps. At first we started as a pilot project. So it was just in one neighborhood. The municipality gave us a building which wasn't damaged. So it was one of the surviving buildings, and it belonged to the municipality. So they said, we can use it. It's our project space. And we invested in it. We brought all the necessary items and services there. And we opened it to the local organizations so they could come in, and start working. So this was just the first step. Obviously, then other steps followed.
So just simply the challenge of finding a space for people to meet to even begin to discuss healing presented a challenge in an environment where many of the buildings were destroyed. And I imagine that's a problem in most earthquake areas.
Yes. So at some point, like you go this roller coaster. First, you are very shocked, and then you kind of enter into this hero space where you start to believe that you can really do something, change something. But you quickly realize, no matter what you do, this is like so big, so devastating. You are just going to make a small difference in this big ocean of sorrow. And what we did, did it really change the course of things? I think we made a difference, but it was just a small piece in the big puzzle. And the reason I'm pointing this out is, anybody who really wants to, help their own community, they need to realize that even focusing on solving the small problems make a difference in the long run. And yes, at that time it was solving the space problem. At that time it was kind of getting the resources together, and it was just for one neighborhood, one region. And imagine like 10 cities are affected. But still, it made a difference, because afterwards, people who saw what we were doing decided to invest more. So I do believe that it kind of gave an inspiration. And sometimes inspiration can be the biggest tool in your tool set when other things are not working.
Very, very interesting. So you would look at the scale of the devastation and feel like, what could I possibly do that would make a difference? But to the people who you responded to, even the smallest gesture or service of help made a big difference to them. And then by other people seeing what you had done, more volunteers stepped up into the space to provide additional help. Is that what you're describing?
In a sense, yes. Obviously, there are big nonprofits in the region, and they are making a difference too. So we need to recognize that. But from a grassroots point, yes, even the small steps make a big difference, and encouraging people, giving that inspiration, do work. I am the living example of it.
You said that Jennifer was very helpful to you in getting started, in helping you find your way into the disaster recovery space. Is there a template or series of recommendations that you would make for people in other communities who would like to do something similar to what you're doing?
Well, actually, I'm very interested in developing that template. I still am not sure. And it's because, not necessarily because there isn't a path we followed, but I'm not sure if it would work in different regions due to cultural differences, or maybe due to the nature of the problem. It's, next time if it's a fire, just like you specialized, maybe this template will not work. So I'm hesitant to make suggestions. On the other hand, I do believe that we need to develop these templates because what I experienced in the last 1 year personally is how efficient the entire process is, and not just our own process, the entire disaster recovery processes. Most of the lessons that we could learn from startup world entrepreneurship is still not applied to this field. Like on the one hand, the world really discovered methods to improve efficiency. On the other hand, those methods are still not applied to disaster recovery field. And somehow I realized that we kind of act like this is the first time happening. Like there were other earthquakes in Turkey. But last year when this happened, we all were very shocked. We all kind of felt like, oh my God, something very unique going on. And even though in a way it's unique, but on the other hand, no, it's happened before more than once. We must have, known what to do from the day one, but we didn't. And I believe. So I'm sorry that I can't really just give you a template, but I do believe that we really need to develop this template. And the good news is we are working on it actively. And when we come up with something that we believe which is going to help many people, I will share on your podcast. I will be happy to do that.
Mesut, I hope you do. And I think that's very sensitive and astute of you to realize that there's not one template that will work all over the planet. That because of the different nature of disasters, whether they're floods or fires or earthquakes, the needs are different, although the sense of loss is probably very similar, but also due to cultural factors in different parts of the world, the approach that you use in providing resiliency and recovery really has to be tailored to the individual area. Is that correct?
Absolutely. So in that sense, actually the problem I'm trying to solve it is beyond this earthquake. So this earthquake, we are already working on it. It's going to take years in that region to reach some kind of meaningful recovery. It's not an easy thing to do. But a bigger question is how we can come together with the people uh, from other parts of the world and really support each other in this field. So maybe we can find answers together. And there are, so this is also one of the inefficiencies. For example, yeah, I could meet with great mentors because, first of all, I'm maybe lucky, but on the other hand, I had very good, global networks and global connections even before the disaster. I had an experience in kind of project management, before the disaster. So I had certain skills to start with, which came very handy. But many people who are in this situation, they are not as lucky. The language is a barrier. They're making these type of connections. It's not very, it's very difficult if you are not already starting from an advantageous point. um, Even you make the connections, language is not the barrier. You probably don't know what the next step is because you are not necessarily good at creating or running projects. So so the next question in my mind is that that we work on trying to solve, how we can create this global network of grassroots organizations. So I'm not talking about this huge, global organization that are already in every country, but grassroots organization that under other circumstances don't have a chance to connect with each other. So how can we bring them together and kind of create the space, just like we did in the earthquake area, create the space this time for the global grassroots organizations and um, try to find answers to our most dire problems as a global community, together, instead of seeing all these issues as local problems that are, forcing people to solve on their own.
So there's probably a lot of knowledge and wisdom and experience that's shared or unshared, unfortunately, as you're saying, but known in different areas, in different pockets, in various organizations, that it would be very helpful if there was a network for people who are working in the recovery field through large organizations or through grassroots organizations to be able to share the commonalities of what they've learned and what works so that every group around the world doesn't have to figure it out for themselves. Is that right?
Exactly. Like imagine you and I connected, uh, and if you were part of this type of a network, people in Turkey or other places that otherwise don't have a chance to reach you, imagine the things they could learn from you. And you also have a network of people. Now imagine those people are also contributing. And this is not just one way relationship either, because I do know that you constantly are looking to learn from other people. And I'm sure that's why also you have this podcast. So this would also give you an opportunity to kind of understand the thinking, the problems people face, the solutions they find. So I think like there is a very good use case. Uh, even for you. And obviously, there needs to be some kind of structure for this network. It should go beyond just having some Zoom calls. But we are actively working on how to make this, the idea of life after disaster something bigger than a local initiative, and how can we make this more like a global network of grassroots organizations.
Have you been able to identify organizations that operate similarly or have a similar mission to yours in different countries?
Yes and no. So I'm good at networking, so I do meet people in this field constantly, and through my connections, I'm also able to reach the kind of local organizations that I couldn't have otherwise. But I also realized that this is a very small number in the big scale of things. So yes, I did identify some organizations. I have got some connections, and I think it's enough to make enough to take the first step. But no, I probably still am missing a big portion of this picture, and we still have a lot to do, a long way to go.
Mesut, I think that pretty well summarizes the situation here for recovery. We have a long way to go, and I'd love to follow up with you offline and see if we can create more of a central clearinghouse meeting space for people who are as committed to recovery efforts as you are. And what you're doing is absolutely inspirational and overwhelming a little bit. I'm sure that the task of trying to create recovery programs is as difficult as recovery is itself for people who are suffering the effects of mass devastation. So, Mesut, thank you so much for spending some time with me this morning.
Thank you very much, Steve. I'm really happy to be here and talk about these issues with you and with your audience.
Well, we will certainly continue that. And I said, thanks for joining me this morning because it's morning here. It's night in Istanbul. So regardless of the time, though, I really appreciate what you're doing. And I think it's very impactful and very important, and we'll continue that. Well, folks, you've been listening to The Fire Break. I'm Steve Wolf. The Fire Break is sponsored by Team Wildfire, dedicated to reducing fatalities and property losses from wildfire. Thanks so much. Talk to you soon. Take care.